I remember like looking at Mama Odie and the details, and it looks like they took the movie and they made it 3D, and that character was standing in front of me. And Louis the alligator, like I can't help but note when you watch the movie, he's got this like little bounce in like his step and his movements. And they built that little bounce into the audio animatronics. So you almost forget that you are watching something that is based on a two-dimensional animated film.
That is Lou Mongello of WDW Radio, and you're listening to the Tomorrow Society podcast. Hey there, thanks for joining me here on episode 237 of the Tomorrow Society podcast. I am your host, Dan Heaton. Excited about today's show with Lou Mongello, who is back for the first time since late 2021. And Lou and I are going to talk about a lot of what is happening now at Walt Disney World, including Tiana's Bayou Adventure, Country Bears Musical Jamboree, which Lou did see a sneak preview of, Communal Core Hall, and then looking ahead to next month's no longer named D23 Expo, and Beyond Big Thunder, Tropical Americas, what we'd like to see happen there. And then talking about what Lou's been doing at WDW Radio, and then everything else he's been involved with, including Adventures by Disney trips, and he does public speaking and coaching. So much happening for him, and also, hopefully, as we look ahead with Disney's theme parks. So let's get right to it. Here is Lou Mongello. Well, I am thrilled to again be talking with the longtime host of the WDW Radio podcast. It is Mr. Lou Mongello. Lou, it is great to have you back here on the podcast.
Thank you for having me back, Dan. It's good to see you.
Definitely. Well, I want to start just talking about WDW Radio because it's been going strong. You're coming up on 800 episodes. And I'm curious, what have you been enjoying doing on the podcast, given just being such a veteran?
Look, it's not lost on me that I've been doing this for almost 20 years, which is a gift. Like it is a gift. It's a blessing to be able to do what I do every day. And I love that, people are like, well, what's your exit strategy? I'm like, I don't know, death. Like, I don't, I have no exit strategy after 2 decades of doing this, because it's still fun the day it stops being fun is the day I stop doing it. But I still enjoy it. I still, the Disney world is always changing. It's always growing. It's always expanding. And I'm able to, adapt and try new things on the show. And I'm always looking to do what's next. So for me, it's still fresh every week.
That's awesome to hear. And I know you do a lot more than record a podcast. I mean, you're doing live videos, you do speaking engagements, coaching, you got a new course. I mean, so what's a typical day like for you? That's like a big question, given all the things you do.
The typical day is there is no typical day, which is part of what keeps me on my toes, parts of what keeps it fresh, right? Because there's really two sides of my business, Dan. There's everything I do on the WDW Radio side, all the things that are Disney related, and then on sort of the Lou Mongello, the business side. Yeah, I do a lot of speaking. I do one-on-one coaching and mentoring. I just launched a course. I have my momentum events coming up and a few other things that I'm working on there. So it's just great balance for me. And as much as, I try and teach the importance of batching things and working on your own schedule, I'm spinning a lot of plates all at once. So sleep is at a premium, but I feed off the energy, right? So, one day, like today, I'm doing a lot of recording podcast interviews and having calls. I try and sort of batch coaching calls on certain days. I have a day that's show day, and Wednesday's the live show, but there's usually a lot of other stuff mixed in now. And Saturdays and Sundays don't matter. They're just other days in the week for me.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that your weeks are not the same, I would guess. They change a lot, based on what's happening. And I know recently you led an Adventures by Disney trip to London and Paris, which that's a whole nother thing. So I'm curious for that particular trip, what that was like for you.
Yeah. So one of the things that look, I'm a face-to-face handshake and a hug kind of guy. Since 2008, I've been doing monthly meetups in Walt Disney World, and that evolved to doing things like other events in the parks and resorts, doing 1 or 2 cruises with the community a year, because community, like the podcast is the nucleus of what I do, but the community is the heart and soul. So it started to evolve beyond that. And probably now for, gosh, maybe 12, 14 years, we've been doing like things like Adventures by Disney. And the last one that we just did was to London and Paris, then added on a couple of days in Disneyland Paris because we're there. How could you not? And it's amazing. And again, it's such a gift to be able to do things. Look, community and things like that has become a marketing buzzword, but it's meaningful to me. Like the fact that somebody spends and shares some of their most valuable commodity, which is their time, like listening to the show and then wanting to vacation together, is incredible. And look, Adventures by Disney does an amazing job. Like the access that you get to things that you just could not do otherwise is incredible. We went to Italy last year. Like when you can just have the 30 of us in the Sistine Chapel after hours was like a mind-blowing experience. And that's similar stuff that we did in London and Paris.
Oh, yeah, because, I've gone to London and Paris and been in the Sistine Chapel, but those were all just like on our own. And it's a little more chaotic, I have to say, navigating. But you mentioned Disneyland Paris, and I was lucky enough to visit, but it was 2006, so it was a little while ago. And the Castle Park especially is just so beautiful, so incredible. But so I know you recently did a show on this exact topic, but if you were trying to convince someone to visit Disneyland Paris, like, how do you sell that to them that it's worth doing? Somebody who maybe goes to Walt Disney World and Disneyland all the time.
That's a great question, right? Because you think, well, one Magic Kingdom is like all the Magic Kingdoms. And if you've been to Disneyland and Walt Disney World, you know that that's not true. Not just because there are attractions that are different, but the environment, the energy is complete. Look, I think Disneyland Paris may be the most beautiful of all sort of the Magic Kingdom parks. I think that the castle there is nothing short of spectacular. The dragon is jaw-droppingly beautiful. Phantom Manor alone is worth it's worth like just go to Paris for Phantom Manor alone. But the way that park is designed, I think it's just visually a stunning park. The attractions are just different enough. And now especially now what they're doing over at the Walt Disney Studios Park, sort of this reimagining and true transformation into the Disney Adventure Park. It's going to be, now I have reason to go back in the next couple of years.
Oh, yeah, because when we went, it was even before Crush's Coaster and Ratatouille and Tower of Terror was being built. And that park, not great, but so I'm excited to see them already have done so much, but to do so much more. And then they added Avengers Campus and everything. There's, it almost isn't the same place that I saw, 18 years ago.
Yeah, they just opened up a new, like Alice, and I want to use like air quotes, like Alice in Wonderland show where the old, like Lights, Motors, Action used to be, which is amazing. It's like this very grand, spectacular, like reimagined version of like what happened to Alice and the Queen after. There's like music and motorcycles and the crowd gets involved and the show is different based on what the crowd's reaction and interaction is with certain things, but super high energy, like very cool music. Little dark on the Queen side. So these are some of the things that it's hard to articulate until you see it. But as you know, watching a video does not necessarily convey just what the experience being in the park is really like.
Well, yeah. I mean, I heard you describe that show, and I remember listening to the show like, what? I don't even understand what they're talking about with this show. So I needed to go watch the video, which again, not the same as going in person, but it's a step further. I haven't even done that yet. So speaking of, one of the things I thought it'd be fun to talk with you about is we're kind of in a zone where it just happens to be the summer Walt Disney World. They've added several new things, most notably Tiana's Bayou Adventure, which as we're recording this, were opened about 2 weeks earlier, but a lot of people had ridden it much before that. So I know, I believe you've ridden it and experienced it. And I'm curious for you just what you thought about it. Because, again, I actually haven't watched the full POV because I'm like, I kind of don't want to be spoiled, but I have watched the Disney videos that show parts of it. So I kind of have the gist. But I'm really curious for someone who's been there, kind of what it feels like to ride that.
So, and not to jump ahead, but this is something I know we're going to talk about too. Look, Dan, if you want to make Disney fans lose their marbles, tell them you're changing something. Like, and watch the internet dumpster fires explode. Whether it's Splash Mountain to Tiana's or whether it's Country Bear Jamboree to the Country Bear Musical Jamboree, it's like, I remember when Maelstrom was closing.
Oh, yeah.
The internet lost its marbles. Like they wanted to chain themselves to the attraction. I'm like, wait a minute. Nobody ever rode it. I call it the ex-girlfriend effect. Like you don't realize how much you love her until she says she's leaving. You're like, no, I swear. Like I love you. I'll come visit you every single day. It like that's what happens with these attractions. But specifically speaking to Tiana's and with Country Bears too, I'll paint with a broad brush. You know, when we hear that beloved classic attractions are going away, they're being reimagined, they're being rethemed. There is this, as much as we trust Disney, there is this like fear of like, well, wait a minute, you're taking away something I love. How can you possibly, how's the new girlfriend going to be any better? Like, how are you going to release with something better? That being said, I think Tiana's is first of all, it's gorgeous. It is a beautiful attraction, both the physical environment, the audio animatronics, the music that is inside. I have an affinity for the film and the characters and the music. So as much as I was sad to lose Splash Mountain, I was encouraged to see this. I think there is, again, like Country Bears Jamboree, I think you're also freshening up an attraction for a new, younger audience that can relate a little bit more to Tiana and Louis and some of the characters than maybe some of the characters from a film that you can't see anymore, or a lot of people have never even seen, which is Song of the South. So I love what they did. There's a huge rewritability factor to it because there's a lot to see, like even in the queue. But one of the things that was really remarkable to me was the fluidity and the lifelike motions of the audio animatronic figures is spectacular. Like look very closely at Tiana. Look at her movements. Look at the way you can almost sort of get a sense of musculature under her arms. Look at her hair, the texture of her hair, the meticulous attention to detail, in addition just to a very fun story. And I won't spoil it, but when you go down into the mountain and sort of what happens to you when you get down there, it's really a fun retelling. And it's not really a retelling. It's sort of a what happens after Princess and the Frog.
Yeah, and you know, I have two daughters, and they liked Splash Mountain when we went on it, largely just, you know, watching me get soaked and them not get wet and stuff. But for them, they don't have any affinity beyond it's a fun log flume. And with Country Bears, it's even more, where they're kind of like, especially my teenager was like, what is this? Like, what? I don't understand. So for them, a new thing like is cool, and I don't have an issue with that at all. I'm good with, especially with both of them. Splash, I totally get it. And I loved Splash Mountain, but I'm totally on board with it. So you bring up a good point about, you know, for me too, Maelstrom, I think the thing I loved as much as anything was there was never a wait. So I was like, this is great. I can just get right on it. And then I think, maybe not. But you have referenced the animatronics, and I wasn't sure because even Frozen Ever After, that was kind of a quick switch over. And now they have the Frozen attraction in Japan that looks incredible. So much better. And even Hong Kong is more improved. But I didn't anticipate that they would go so full on with the animatronics and really, to me, create not just an overlay. It almost, from what I've seen at least, and correct me if I'm wrong, feels, I mean, yes, you're on the same path, but feels like a lot much of a bigger switch to a new attraction versus even Maelstrom to Frozen Ever After.
Without a doubt. You make a great point. And I'll say, and just understand sort of the point of the story. So I was actually invited by Disney out to Imagineering a few weeks before Tiana's Bayou Adventure opened to, in addition to seeing other things, to literally go behind the curtain at the WDI labs and see the audio animatronics, which they were preparing for Disneyland, in various stages of construction and development, to really get a very close up look at just what goes into designing these. And I remember like looking at Mama Odie and the details, and it looks like they took the movie and they made it 3D, and that character was standing in front of me. And Louis the alligator, like I can't help but note, when you watch the movie, he's got this like little bounce in like his step and his movements, and they built that little bounce into the audio animatronics. So you almost forget that you are watching something that is based on a 2-dimensional animated film, because it feels like a completely different attraction. The track is the same, but it feels very different than Splash Mountain did, which I think is wonderful and refreshing, and it's new, and I think is exciting for a lot of people. And you know, eventually, as time goes on, we'll remember fondly, but we'll start to forget about the ex-girlfriend a little bit.
Yes. Yeah, no, I'm with you, and I'm almost more interested. We'll talk about it a bit later with some of the things they may do in the future after seeing what they did here, because it seems like with animatronics, they're just like for the fact that you went to Imagineering and to have an animatronic that can work and be cool to see when it's not something you see for 5 seconds on a ride that you can stop and look at. I suspect that's even more impressive that you went to Imagineering and that those animatronics were so impressive to see, like standing in one place when you're not looking at 25 other things.
Well, and they showed us some other stuff too. So they showed, I don't know if you saw the video from Hong Kong of Duke Weaselton and sort of pushing this cart. I mean, these are free roaming, walking, talking, jumping, like somersaulting audio animatronics figures. They showed us a couple of things that they were working on for Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Like, again, you forget almost that these are,
yeah.
You look at sort of the older audio animatronics figures and you can see just what a leap this was, from the A100 figures like the Wicked Witch in Great Movie Ride. That was at one point the pinnacle. And now look where we are with these free roaming characters. Judy Hopps roller skates. Like, so it's, and I think we're just sort of on the cusp of some pretty incredible advances that we'll start to see integrated into the parks even more.
Definitely. And we can talk about it now. You referenced the Country Bears Musical Jamboree, which I did watch a video of, though I found that the videos, sometimes it was hard to hear the songs because people were cheering so much in the videos I saw yesterday, but you were able to see a sneak peek. Now, by the time this episode comes out, it will have opened, barring something catastrophic, so it would have opened about a week ago. But obviously, we're recording this before that. And I know you were lucky enough to see at the time like a sneak peek. And so I'm curious just your first impressions of it. And again, we could talk about, for me, I'm just so relieved the Country Bears are there. Right. And so right away, but I'm not even going to give any more thoughts of mine because I'd love to hear your impressions first.
Yeah, same thing. Like when you see that an attraction closes, you're like, uh-oh, is it going to happen like that happened in Disneyland, or are they going to keep these characters? This show, again, the same thing. I personally, and I know I'm not alone, like I have an emotional, sentimental, nostalgic attachment to this attraction. My dad loved this. He loved Big Al. And you're like, uh-oh, like is Big Al going to be back? Like there may not be blood on the saddle and we might not be whipping little Buford or shooting him if the case may be. But I think the attraction, and I won't spoil, I'll try not to spoil anything. It is fun. It is legit funny. Like Country Bear Jamboree, like we loved it because it was campy and corny and funny. This is like funny, but still in that same corny and campy ways. But I think more importantly, it's so much more relatable to a new, especially younger audience. Right? A lot of those songs we have emotional attachments to because we've been listening to them for 50 years. Right? We went with our parents. Maybe we took our kids. But then sometimes you're sort of dragging your kids into Country Bear Jamboree, but they don't feel the same way about it. Here, when you hear these like country western reimagined takes on more modern music and Disney music, there's that instant relatability. Like I get it. Like I know the song. I hear the song. And when you see, Teddy Barrish singing Shakira, like in and of itself, it's funny, but it's so well done. And the thing that was important to me was that it's very respectful of the original. The things that we know and love about the original are still there. It's full of Easter eggs. It's full of little tributes, some of which are a little bit tougher. You have to sort of listen carefully for them, to the Country Bears, as well as to some, I don't want to spoil it. There's this great throwaway in there that references sort of the origins of the Country Bear. When you hear it, you're like, oh, that I dig it. Even in the lobby, like there's almost like this museum of artifacts from the history of the Country Bears according to story, which I think helps to paint a complete picture. But I dig it. I can't wait to go back and see it again.
Yeah, and I know what reference you're talking about, though I won't mention it. But like if you just look at the track listing, like I looked at the list because actually a few songs I wasn't sure. And then I looked at it. If you just saw it, especially with the Big Al example, I was like, huh. That's a really odd choice for Big Al. But I will say, especially in that case, so a few of the others might have to grow on me a bit, but that particular case is really cool. Like, it's really funny. And I agree with you. My dad still, like, I'm not sure he laughed harder anywhere at Disney than at Big Al, I think. I don't know what it is, same about the generations or what.
I was in the very first showing, and I'm grateful to have been invited by Disney to be part of that showing. So there was some invited media, and there was some Frontierland cast who were invited to go. You're right. It was tough to hear because people were not only like clapping and stomping their feet, but they were like genuinely hooting and hollering and laughing out loud, which is exactly what you want to hear, right? You want to hear the dialogue, you want to hear the songs, but I love the fact that there was this genuine appreciation of it.
Yeah, and I hope that continues, and I think it probably will. But I'm really interested to see it in person for sure. But I'm glad you got to see it, and you can tell, at least my perspective, you can tell some of the people that worked on it definitely have an affinity for Country Bears and what they were in the past.
I spoke to a couple of the Imagineers afterward, and you can tell, look, first of all, they get it because they're fans first. But you can tell, like, and that's why I talk about that reverence and respect for the original while still wanting to make sure it's attractive and appealing to today's audience and a younger audience too.
For sure. Well, I want to switch gears to Epcot, where we did see an opening recently. I was there in March, and I will say trying to walk around that building with the closed paths was very annoying, but Communicore Hall is now finally opened, which is good. And, it has an outdoor stage, it has a meet and greet. I feel like it needs more shade, but beyond that, we don't need to go too far into that. But when there are festivals, like, what do you think? I mean, how do you picture that's going to be used? Do you think it has a lot of potential to be used well when there's festivals and more going on?
Yeah, Communicore Hall is interesting, and because I saw it again, I was grateful to be invited to a media preview and opening. So it was full, and there was bands inside, there was bands outside, there was great energy, and there was a lot of people. There was food being served inside. Very different than when it opened officially, and there was that not going on, right? There were no food stalls, there were no bands. Like the Encanto show, by the way, is amazing, right? I think kids especially are going to absolutely love that very interactive, very fun, very high energy show. That's a purpose-built space specifically for festivals. Yes, there's places to sit inside that if you want to get out, you want to do some work, you want to like just cool off a little bit, you can sit inside, you can sit outside, but we won't know what Communicore Hall is really going to look and feel like until that first festival comes, which is going to be here sooner rather than later, right? It now starts like in August. I think there's like 2 weeks now that there's no festival. So that's when that space is really going to come to life. And I think it's me personally, I can't pass judgment on it until I see it for the purpose in which it was built, right? Does that make any sense? Like the photographs you see now, and again, the internet is sometimes a very harsh.
Yes.
I get it. It looks like a cafeteria. It looks like an airport. You're right? Because there's tables and chairs and you can use this however you want. But when the festival starts and those, things come up and all of a sudden there's food and there's music inside, there's other entertainment that I think that they have planned for that. That is when I will sort of have a better idea of what that space is going to look and feel like.
No, that totally makes sense. And that's why I kind of framed the question about the festivals, because we could spend 10 minutes here just going, oh my gosh, this place. But it's at one point, it's like, I think it is designed to function kind of like Wonders of Life, that pavilion did later as a festival center, but in a different way because it has that outdoor area and everything. So I'll be interested to see how it kind of shifts. Well, I want to ask you too, Epcot, I grew up, loved going to Epcot, still really enjoy going, love the festivals, love Guardians, some of the things that recently, but it sounds like now the transformation that they've described, obviously before the pandemic and everything, so it got slowed down, is finished at least for now. I'm curious kind of for you, like, as you look at that park, kind of, how do you feel about it now, given all the changes where we now have the different setup with the neighborhoods and then some of the new attractions? Like, what sticks out to you about that park now versus how it even was 5 years ago when they announced that?
So I think the operative word is that it's a park, right? I think, again, it's funny because people will say, there's nowhere to sit in Epcot. There's nowhere to like just relax in Epcot. We're like, all right, we're going to build you places in with Future World, places to sit and just sort of relax and charge up your phone and recharge your own personal batteries. Like, well, wait a minute. Why didn't you build an attraction? Like, because you just told that you wanted a place. I think the idea is, at least in this stage of the transformation of Epcot, and look, we did not get what was originally envisioned and yeah, promised for Epcot, right? We didn't get that big building in the center. We didn't get Mary Poppins. We didn't get A, B, C, and D. I think for a number of reasons, COVID included, that vision changed. What we have now is a place, and especially as a local, like I get it and I enjoy it. Like I enjoy being able to go to Epcot and have a meeting in that section of Future World and sit outside with, a coffee from Starbucks, or now sit inside as I have to do some work or relax or get out of the sun. So I think that section of, I can't help, I still call it Future World.
Of course, me too.
Is meant to be sort of a place to relax and take it slow. And I do honestly believe that there are more attractions, and yes, maybe pavilions that are coming. D23 is right around the corner. That will speak volumes, obviously, about what is coming. So I do think there was a bit of a pivot in terms of what this stage of the transformation was supposed to be. We hear 5 years and all we got was this. Again, that's fair, but I think it's part of my hope and my wish, Dan, is that this is part of a longer term vision.
Yeah, and I gotta say, for me, I went in March, and I think that central area is really awesome. Like it's one of those where you describe it, and it's like, what? Okay, there's Walt, which that statue is very nice and everything, but for me, just walking through it and with the newer Epcot theme playing and everything, and then you have Journey of Water, which also to me was much better than I expected it to be. A lot of that I feel is really great and much better and more interesting than I expected.
And they're guest satisfiers.
Yeah.
They're without a doubt, they're guest satisfiers.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so I got to ask you, since you brought it up, I mean, as somebody, I know you've went to the parks, early Epcot, all that, and have seen it through all the years. Like D23 comes up, what would you like them to do at Epcot or announce?
How much time do we have?
Take your time. I love this stuff.
Yeah, look, I'm going to be perfectly transparent. I really believe, and I hope, and I wish, and I want. I think Disney will or let's say needs to give us something at the parks and resorts presentation at D23, the Ultimate Disney Fan Experience, not Expo anymore, right? That is going to make our jaws drop to the floor. They have to. Dan, they've got to give us something that we have not heard about yet. Yes, I want to know more about Beyond Big Thunder. I want to know more about what's coming to Animal Kingdom. I'm expecting, finally, after all these years, the announcement about what's going to happen to the Imagination Pavilion. I think Figment is not going anywhere, although I would not be upset about an inside-out roller coaster of emotions. However, I think for a variety of reasons, right? I think the last couple of, especially the last Expo, Josh talked about some blue sky ideas, I think, to sort of get a little bit of a pulse of what the reaction to those things was going to be. But I want to think that there is an ace up their sleeve that they have not hinted to as yet that's going to make us and the audience and those watching at home and those reading going, oh my God, like I can't wait, because this is the big thing that's coming, because there's a lot of talk about the dark place down the street whose name, let's just say there's some epic conversations going about the things that are happening there. And I'm not saying it's in response to that, because Disney always has a 10-year vision and a 10-year plan, but this is it. This is your moment to be like, all right, this is the thing that we have been working on quietly in the background. And I think August is going to be a very interesting time for Disney fans.
I hope so, because personally, I mean, I'm super excited about the epic spot down the street, I got to say personally. But I also want to see, I mean, one of the reasons I think it's going to be a cool park, but two, it's going to put some pressure in, and Bob Iger can say that he's not concerned, but I am sure, I'm not saying they're freaking out, but they have an opportunity, I feel like you say, to say, okay, we've hinted at all these things. Here's our vision for the next 4 to 5 years, not just 2025, but beyond. And there's some good potential at all the parks, especially Animal Kingdom. But at Epcot, I feel like I agree with you. There's still a lot of potential and what they can do.
I agree. I think that there's potential on both sides of the park, right? Just for ease of use, we'll call it Future World and World Showcase. I think there is opportunity for the Imagination Pavilion. I think there's opportunity for other aspects of the park, right? We have, what's the status of the play pavilion? Whatever happened, sort of wonders of life is sort of just sitting there quietly doing nothing. I think now is the time. Now is the best time for us to sort of find out. A new Pavilion and World Showcase has been hinted at for decades.
Yeah.
Years ago there was a vision and a discussion about a plan to sort of blow out that lagoon in the back a little bit by World Showplace and extend that and put hotels and is that going to happen? I don't know. They definitely need it. I would bet, I'd bet a lot that there's going to be new resorts coming to the parks, in a number of different locations because, say what you will, the parks are crowded and so are the hotels.
Yeah, and I think there is, you see it. They just opened the new area in Tokyo with a big hotel next to it. And I'm like, wow, that you can walk right out. And you've seen like Grand California and how well that works. But in Florida, I think, especially with Beyond Big Thunder, it might make sense over there to do something. I don't know, beyond just the lands, but to combine it with something else, give people, and I don't even imagine what they could charge for that resort if they put it like a Frontierland themed resort or something. Oh my goodness. Also wanted to ask you about a couple things that are coming soon. One of them being a new Little Mermaid show, because Hollywood Studios, I feel like, has some amazing headliners, but needs more things to do. And now we're finding it's not just bringing back the show. They're going to do something new. So I'm curious, we don't know much. We know concept art and it's going to be based on the original film. And that's about it. But I'm curious, what interests you about that show?
Well, I think, again, it's something familiar. It's something beloved. It's something that transcends generations. So it makes sense to put something in there that is going to pull on the emotional heartstrings of little kids as well as adults that literally grew up with Little Mermaid, right? So the classic film still holds up. There was the live action remake. So there still is this love and interest for that character and those stories. I'm sure we're going to have some new music and things like that in there as well. And the refreshing of the theater too. Again, I think these are all these are like small indicators. Like I just feel like something big is coming, and maybe it's just the fan in me that just wants it to be true. But I think these are like very small stepping stones to some bigger stuff that's going to be happening. Look, they're investing, $17 billion. Like that's a lot of money over the next decade or so, and I think that goes a long way. And I think that's gonna. You don't need billions of dollars to refresh a Little Mermaid show. So I think it's an indicator that there's a lot of big stuff on the near and far horizon.
Well, before we get into a few of the big things that we only kind of know about, I'm curious for your thoughts on Test Track, because we mentioned Epcot and they have closed it, Test Track 2.0, not officially, not completely, it's coming back. But all we really know about this new version, it's going to take some inspiration from World of Motion. Now, how much that is, I'm not overthinking that. But then also, it likely will still use the same track and have the same ending. But the concept art appeared to make it look like they're going to have more sets and more involved. But I'm curious, what you think about this, because as someone who I know experienced World of Motion, Test Track 1, Test Track 2, this is another different version of that coming into this same location.
Yeah, look, I would love to see. Look, there's this renewed sense of nostalgia, right? That we see that's been happening for a number of years, and I'll almost sort of use like the Return of the Orange Bird a number of years ago was sort of like the beginning of this recognition and leaning into the sense of nostalgia that we as Disney fans have. I would be very surprised if we don't see a lot of throwbacks to World of Motion in whatever this new iteration of Test Track is going to be, which again was always very crowded, but I like the fact that they don't just sort of let it sit there and just do its thing. Like, even though it's crowded, it's due for a facelift, it's due for an upgrade. And I think it's due for like a lot of these attractions. I think we're going to see an additional level of interactivity. And like we saw on Test Track in the queue a little bit more of the personalization of the experiences as well.
Well, yeah, and there's more things they can do even than they could do in 2012. At that point, it was just like the first thing that they used the Magic Band with. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, Lou. But I know it has improved a lot. Well, it's hard because I feel like we've already kind of hit on it. But I was curious, as we look to I'm going to call it the D23 Expo. I'm sorry. The other name, I mean, I can't do it, Lou. I just can't. It's like Future World. It's like, I'm not going to try to remember what's in World Celebration versus Nature and everything else. But Animal Kingdom, like you referenced it, they had their thought experiment where they threw out some ideas. And then last year at the Destination D23, they threw out what seemed to be more concrete based on what we know with Indiana Jones and Encanto and everything else, replacing Dino Land, which I do like Dinosaur, but I understand. What would you like to see? I don't really want to make it into just predicting. I'm curious what you would like to see based on kind of what we know, but building on that to what we actually get.
So for me, it doesn't always have to be the e-ticket attraction, which I think what Indiana Jones is going to be, right? They're going to utilize the same ride system and tracks. I hope and I want it to be, and I think it will be different than the Disneyland version, which I absolutely love. I think it's spectacular. That cavernous space when you enter is continues to be a jaw-dropping moment in any of the Disney parks worldwide. But I also love the retheming of the space itself, right, to the Central and South Americas. Look, we forget that Dino Land was, by design and intent, was supposed to be a relatively temporary land, which is why the attractions were there. Yes, it was like, oh, let's call it a carnival. There were sort of like carnival-based attractions because it's supposed to be temporary for a very, very, very long time. So I think this refreshing of that space, I know some people don't love, all IP-based attractions, but they are attractors, right? It's easier to tell your kids that, or for your kids to tell you, I want to go see an Encanto-themed attraction versus something that is not IP-based, although I personally would like to see things like a Mystic Manor and stuff like that come to the States that are not necessarily based on IP, but I also understand this is a business, and way more people came to see Frozen Ever After than they did to come to see Maelstrom.
What are you talking about? Yeah, I'm with you. And, I will say with the Animal Kingdom in particular that I was very skeptical of Pandora, and it really, even so, continues to be something that I really enjoy. So I'm sure it's going to be impressive, whatever they do. I just hope that they continue to kind of expand that park, because I love walking the walking trails and just hanging out. But I know to a lot of people that park is still kind of looked at as not being a full day experience.
Yeah. If you go in the summer, it's a full day experience because it's crowded, but I think you're right. And I think too, Animal Kingdom has always had the vision and potential of growth and expansion. Look, what we ended up getting for Pandora was less than what was originally designed, right? Attractions were going to be longer. There was going to be something else beyond and beside the canteen. So I don't think Pandora is done by any stretch, especially with what is James Cameron working on, like 9 more Avatar films, like all at the same time.
Yes.
I don't think that we've seen the last of expansion and growth in Pandora as well.
It's going to be interesting. And that leads me into asking you about Disneyland, because they did get their DisneylandForward proposals approved. And Bob Iger just loves talking about Avatar at California, but we don't actually really get much information. And then we may get more at Avengers Campus. I know they still had that e-ticket that they seem to be working on, but we don't know much about. But I'm curious, what would you like to see at Disneyland? Because right now they've given a lot of, we might do this, but we don't have a lot of concrete info yet.
I think DisneylandForward is fascinating because I think it gives not just Disneyland, but the domestic parks, like a clean slate. Like it's a clean canvas that they can do anything they want with, because they are not necessarily constrained by the 4 corners of storytelling that are existing in other lands. Look, when you say, all right, we're going to refresh Splash Mountain, you are to a certain degree, like you're not going to put a space-themed roller coaster in the middle of Frontierland. Here you've got this blank canvas. So I would imagine that the folks at WDI sort of like are salivating going, we can do anything we want. We haven't had this domestically since the opening of Animal Kingdom, which again is painted on a small canvas because it has to be animal related. Goodbye to some of the mythical creatures that never came to be. So I think that it presents huge opportunity. And again, I think this is something I think we're gonna see a lot about Disneyland Forward at D23, which is coming down to just a few weeks.
I hope so, because I feel like there's a lot of potential there, and they draw so many people there. So I think DCA in particular, which I think has improved a lot with Cars Land and then Avengers Campus and everything else. But I feel like there's a lot of potential there for sure. Well, I did want to ask you a bit more about Beyond Big Thunder, because again, it seems like they presented that again kind of at the last 2 years ago as we might go Beyond Big Thunder and we might do this or this, but it seems a little more concrete by now. I mean, as much as it can be, but kind of again, I mean, at first it sounded kind of crazy, but I think it'll probably happen. But I'm curious the kinds of things you might like to see back there beyond, we're never going to get a Western River expedition. So is there something else back there we could get?
Again, that's fascinating too. And I think unless, hop on Google Maps and take a look, there's a lot more land back there than it might necessarily seem if you're walking through Magic Kingdom, and land equals opportunity. We've heard mention of some of the IPs that might be based on there. We've also heard from a lot of people, this is the wish list, right? We've heard Villains Land for eons. They were going to build a bald mountain, a fire mountain in Fantasyland at one point, and that sort of started to rekindle the rumors of a villains themed fifth gate, which I don't think will ever happen, but maybe a villains themed section of a park. If we're playing armchair Imagineer, like just for fun, just for giggles, how cool would it be if when you go beyond Big Thunder, you literally are going and figuratively going beyond Big Thunder, there's this portal that you're going to walk through that's going to take you to this a land where the villains have taken over. And all of a sudden you can now integrate, in fun, not scary ways, because this is a park for kids as well as adults, but you bring in Hades, you bring in Facilia, you bring in these classic beloved villains and let them sort of go to their town, right? And build a number of different types of experiences and attractions in there. And I think I'm going to go back to this idea of it being immersive and personalized, right? The reason there's a lot of technology already in place that I think is not even necessarily being fully leveraged with magic bands and things like that. And this might be a great opportunity to bring some of those ideas, maybe dust some even off the shelves and bring them into a villain themed area of the park.
That's really interesting. And especially, I mean, I don't have the map in front of me, but if you have that back there and somehow you're able to connect that over to Fantasyland, the idea that you're in Fantasyland and then you take a portal to an area that's not so fantasy, it's fantasy, but in a totally different way. I think that's an interesting way to connect it that way too. And also too, you would lose that dead end, which I don't know about you, but I hate to say dead end, but that corner by Big Thunder is always kind of a tricky area to navigate in the parks.
I think we have to. Yeah, we have to. They literally have to show us some sort of concrete plan. And I know that plane is already in flight because there have been, waste treatment and water treatment sort of plans already filed. So we know that it's happening, but we need to see something a little bit more in terms of concrete concept art.
Well, I like what I'm hearing here, Lou.
I could be completely wrong, Dan. It could be Mary Poppins land, and we're all like, so.
I'm going to contact you and be like, Lou, you told me we were getting all these things. I have it on the show. Well, before we finish, I've not prepared you for these, Lou. So these are, I've heard you do this before, some rapid fire kind of questions where you can give more than like one word, but to get a really quick response from you before. Are you ready for this, Lou?
No, I'm not, but we'll do it anyway. That's fine.
I'm just kidding. We're not doing it. No. All right. Well, okay. These are not hard. I promise I'm not trying to stump you. I know you're the trivia guy with your books, but I'm not going to stump you. Don't worry. It's just your opinions on things. So just to be clear. Okay. Real simple. I know you love Disneyland Paris. What is your favorite attraction at that resort?
Phantom Manor.
Yes, I will second that as someone who has been there. So sadly, I know you did a tribute and you have met him in person. We did lose Richard Sherman recently, but I'm curious to you, what's your favorite Sherman Brothers song?
Walt was right. It's Feed the Birds.
I can't argue there. Okay, so What should Disney do with the Galactic Starcruiser space?
You said this was a lightning round. This is a much longer conversation.
Give me a paragraph.
Um, they need to figure out what they want that space to be. If it's going to be a hotel, then there's some additional things that have to be built into it in order to make it a true resort hotel experience. Or is it a day visit? Is it something like a hoop-de-doo where you visit for a couple of hours, you go and see a dinner show, you shop, maybe there's some interactive things that go on, but now you're sort of foregoing those 100 hotel rooms that you invested a lot of money in because this is a business and it is about dollars and cents. So it's a very interesting and unique conundrum I think Disney has.
I think that's good. I'm with you on that. Well, I know, you are a choose the good person. And so I'm going to ask you for something that you think looks cool at Epic Universe. What is something you think looks cool?
Oh, man. So I'm not as closely well-versed in the details of Epic Universe, but from that 30,000 foot view and this portals to different lands and integrating IP as well as unique and new storytelling, I think is brilliant. I think it's brilliant. I'm very, very curious. And like I said, there's a huge buzz, even I think in the Disney community of folks who are not Universal fans, what's going on there. How they're going to get people down, how they're going to get them there is going to be a different story. That's the attraction that I want to see most. It's how you're going to get people down that corridor. But it'll be fascinating to see when it opens.
Well, there's a thing called a people mover. I don't know, Lou. I think that might work. But okay, Inside Out 2.
Yeah.
Massive hit. I have not seen it yet, so I'm not going to ask about the movie. But if you're Disney and we're not imagination off the table, we're not doing that. What could you do with Inside Out in the parks? Like, what do you think is a good spot or something they could do? Because Inside Out is hot right now.
I just love the emotional roller coaster. Like, it just makes so much sense. I have seen it. I loved it. Like, it was an emotional roller coaster. Like, I laughed and I cried. So I would love to see, look, those characters in there, we all have them in us, right? They're timeless. So there's a lot more that you can do. Maybe it's not Epcot. Maybe they don't belong in Epcot. Maybe they belong in Disney's Hollywood Studios somewhere.
I like that. I'm tracking with that. Okay. This actually, I was going to ask that earlier and I jumped right over it. So I'm going to do it as a rapid fire. Disney's 2 days from when this comes out is unveiling their new Lightning Lane multi-pass. But I'm curious, what's something that stands out that you think is maybe something good that's like a positive step for that?
Genie Plus was too complicated. It was just in a very simple, it was too complicated. There was too much planning, too much prep. Up at 7 a.m. Do I not going to get my Lightning Lanes, Genie Plus, Lightning Lane? It's for the average guest, it's overwhelming. And I think this system makes absolute sense.
Awesome. Well, that's it for the lightning questions. You did awesome, Lou. I didn't get you. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to make you nervous there.
No, that's fun stuff. I dig it.
A lot of topics in a short time. Okay. Well, I have to ask you, what's coming up for you at WDW Radio, or is there anything else you're doing right now beyond prepping for the not named D23 Expo that you're excited about?
Yeah, so we're gonna have a booth at Expo again. So I'm looking forward to that. I love that event. We have a Halloween on the High Seas cruise that goes to Lookout Key, which I recently saw and which is beautiful. In October, we're doing a group cruise on the Disney Treasure in February, which I can't wait to see, simply because, like we said, leaning into the nostalgia, leaning into the parks with Haunted Mansion and you're going to have a tough time getting people out of that Haunted Mansion lounge and the 20,000 Leagues pub as well. And then next year, we're doing a lot of traveling together. We've got an Adventures by Disney back to Japan, which for me is the most spectacular place on earth. We have 2 Adventures by Disney to Disneyland in Southern California, which we've done in the past, like Jim Henson Studios and Imagineering and the studio and a few other surprises as well. And then we're doing a river cruise on the Seine in the fall. And then I've got a couple other things on the whiteboard that I'm not showing you that I'm looking forward to announcing in person and otherwise.
Well, it sounds like you're not going to have much to do at all. You're just going to be hanging out in your office, just
a lot of napping, a lot of.
It's going to be easy. Well, again, if somebody's not aware, where can they connect or listen to the show or learn more about what you're doing?
So you can find everything I do on the Disney side of things at WDWRadio.com. And you can find the podcast on any of the podcast players as well as on Spotify. I do live video every Wednesday night on Facebook and YouTube. And on the other side of things, if you're interested on the business side of things, you can find everything over at LouMongello.com. And I'm at Lou Mongello on all social.
Awesome. Well, Lou, this has been great. We've covered a lot of ground. I'm expecting a lot now from Disney. Thanks for that. But I really appreciate it. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, brother. I appreciate you.
Just want to give a big thanks to Lou for taking the time to be on the show. He's still plugging away at the podcasting so many years later and a lot of other activities. So it was really fun to check in and find out what's going on for him and the parks in general. I also wanted to mention that I was recently a guest on the new podcast called Music Behind the Magic, hosted by Jonathan Goodman, where he talks about some cool topics related to music and Disney's films and the parks. And what we talked about were some of our favorite musical memories or music moments on attractions at the parks. I talked about, of course, Original Epcot Center. I talk about Happily Ever After, a show that I love, Impressions to France. I talk about Q Music, so many other things that we go into. It was really fun. The episode was just released. And you just go to wherever you listen to podcasts, just go search for Music Behind the Magic, and you can listen to this episode. Thanks to Jonathan for having me on the show. I really enjoyed it. Also wanted to give a big thanks to members of the Tomorrow Society through Patreon, Josh Harris, Kai Layton, Lizzie Ellis, some of my earliest members of the Tomorrow Society. Thanks so much for helping support the show. If you'd like to help out the show, we don't have sponsors. They don't have weird mid-roll ads. You can go to patreon.com/Tomorrow Society. You can make a small monthly contribution, get access to some really cool perks. And that is really what drives the show and keeps this podcast going. Or you can buy me a Dole Whip with a one-time contribution by going to tomorrowsociety.com/Dole Whip. If you'd like to get a hold of me, send me an email, dan@tomorrowsociety.com, or you can follow me on social media. I'm out there wherever. Just search for Tomorrow Society. Out there on Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook. Have a YouTube channel where I continue to post videos. Check that out. And it would be awesome to connect with you. The music you're hearing right now was written by Adam Hookey and performed by the Sophisticated Babies. Thanks so much for listening to this episode 237 with Lou Mongello, and I will talk to you again next time.